This is very exciting. I'm super pumped to be here to get to talk to you about film. I feel very lucky.
Stop it.
No, I'm lucky. I'm lucky. But I also wanted to say thank you because in preparation for, chatting, I just went back through your catalog and basically it was like an excuse to watch like 15 great movies.
Oh
Like
my
I
God.
didn't even get all of them. I mean, I had seen most of them, but they were just like the one I watched last night, The Long Dumb Road, The Tale. There's just so many good ones. And um, it was just a delight.
Thank you.
So
Thanks for
thank
doing
you for
that.
having an amazing catalog. I guess there's so many places we could start, but I feel like I just have to ask, how's your pandemic going, basically?
Oh my
How's both with movies to release, but also more, personally, just how you doing?
Yeah, well, as you can relate with The Outside Story, which was supposed to premiere at Tribeca this year, congratulations on that. It's been a really tough year to release movies, and it's strange because I've basically seen this pandemic through the release of three different movies: Swallow, which opened in theaters and on VOD March 6th,
Mhm.
and then a movie called Black Box, which released on Amazon Prime in October, and I had just wrapped that movie right before the pandemic hit. So like I was in New Orleans shooting until mid-February, and I got home, and then, and it was a movie made specifically for Amazon for streaming.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of crazy how it just like went right on Amazon a few months later.
Right.
And then I had this movie called I Carry You With Me that premiered at Sundance earlier this year, which was sort of like the last normal film festival. And it was supposed to be released in theaters in June, which then became September, which then became November,
Right.
which
Right.
then became January. And then we just did like a 1 week qualifying run in a theater in Long Island, just so we could qualify for 2020 awards. And then, so we're not going to be released until the spring. So it's just a
Mhm.
bizarre, it's been very bizarre.
Yeah.
So, but also sort of interesting seeing everything through the lenses of pandemic. But I've been in New York City the whole time. I live in Queens. I grew up in Brooklyn and Kensington. My
Right on.
commute to Hunter was an hour and 15 minutes each way.
Mhm.
um, yeah. So, but tell me how you've dealt with Outside Story. This is your first feature. I feel so bad that this is your first feature gets premieres in a pandemic.
Yeah.
So how do
Well,
you cope
in
with
a
that?
way that, I do think it could make it more memorable in a weird way. This year is so weird. Everyone is going to remember this year and everything about it. But yeah, to your point, it is, while I've made peace with it, it definitely was not the year, like the release that I was looking forward to. Like I imagined there'd be this kind of, when we found out we were going to premiere at Tribeca, that looked like, oh wow, couldn't be more perfect. Shot it in New York. The Outside Story is a New York story. I, like you, am a born and bred New Yorker. And so it really felt very kind of perfect to start there. And then I imagined this tour taking place across the country and, maybe even international. And really, we were talking about this yesterday, getting to see the film multiple times, many times, with an audience and with a big screen. Would have been amazing. And especially because my film is a film about kind of like intimate relationships, small story, a kind of sweet story. There's a really fun juxtaposition when you throw it up on a big screen. You take this small story and you put it
Yeah.
on the big screen. So I definitely feel like, we missed out on that. But like you, I look at your films, the three films that you had coming out this year. It's like you had one for like almost each stage of the pandemic. You had like
Right.
first surge, second surge.
Right.
But when a year ago, again, I thought all these things were going to happen with my film, and then Tribeca gets canceled, and I'm like, well, actually, is it even ever coming out? Like, what's happening? Like, are we trying to sell it now before we show it to anyone? And it was just kind of like months of limbo. So the fact that it actually then ended up having a pretty like special festival run, that while I couldn't participate in it personally, the fact that it played drive-ins all over the country, the fact that I feel like we have to talk about drive-ins as
Totally.
a weird saving grace of big screen theater. And the fact that I could do Q&As and do interviews and chat with people remotely like this, shout out technology. That is kind of amazing. So, I feel at peace with it right now. And I'm very, the movie, we just signed a distribution deal, and the movie's going to come out
Congratulations.
in the spring of 2021, theoretically.
Right.
Um, and so I'm excited and curious what that's going to look like, but I feel like we're checking all the boxes.
Right.
So I feel okay
Well,
about.
it's great. I think the timing of a release is going to be great because I think the movie is so timely for this pandemic. It's about a shut-in basically in New York City, and like who goes outside, he gets locked outside and he has to interact, he's forced to interact with people. And it's such a New York story. You can tell when a story is made by a native New Yorker. It felt very New York and it's very sweet. So I hope everybody will go to see it. But I'm curious, which did you play any drive-ins in New York City?
So we did. We played August 1st was our first like in-person screening, and that was at Rooftop Films, Brooklyn Drive-In. So again, that's what I mean. It's like there's so many kind of special touchstones. And we had been very kind of locked down before that. And we then, that was like really, I think the first almost like gathering I'd been to with other people. We played a big drive-in at Brooklyn Army Terminal. So again, doing a drive-in in New York City felt very unique. And we actually cast came, we did this masked up Q&A. So it felt extremely dystopian. It was very like, almost futuristic and creepy, and yet very kind of beautiful and inspirational. And, I don't know, I hadn't been to a drive-in in probably 20 years, maybe. And like,
probably never in New York City, right?
Definitely never in New York City. And so that was like very unique. And it was really actually, it felt like a very special premiere. Again, I felt really lucky in a pandemic that to achieve that was really wonderful. And so that's, a credit to Rooftop Films. And
yeah, which was, by the way, Rooftop was founded by Dan Nuxall, who went to Stuyvesant. He was my year at Stuyvesant. And it's when he was, I was, friends with him. So I was talking to him about putting this rooftop drive-in together. And he did a little bit of research of like, have there ever been any drive-ins in New York? The last one shut down in the Bronx in like the early 80s. And, growing up watching Grease, I'd always been fascinated by drive-ins. And it's actually my movie Swallow, which, as I mentioned, opened in theaters and on VOD on March 6th. March 6th was the very last normal weekend. The following weekend was when everything started shutting down. So my distributor, IFC Films, was really actually probably like the best at pivoting of all the distributors out there. And Swallow was one of the first like new movies that was put in a drive-in. And so they basically programmed the film in a drive-in in Ocala, Florida, which is like a very like red part of Florida. And my movie is about abortion, basically. There's an abortion in it. And so I was like, I wonder what the people of Florida think about that.
Right. Yeah, have it run through the South, really change some minds. But that's right. You were like early on the kind of drive-in. I feel like that was like one of the first. I feel like I saw that and I was like, yeah, why aren't we doing more drive-ins? Why isn't that happening? And correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Swallow also, which is, a like wonderful, beautiful, disturbing movie, sticks with you. I mean, it's really, I can't say enough good things about it. But wasn't it also the #1 movie in America for?
It was. It was the first #1 movie during the pandemic. Basically, it's just because of a technicality. Because like most of the distributors, like they pulled their movies out of theaters. All the theaters shut down, and the few drive-ins that were open were programmed with older films like Indiana Jones and E.T.
Right. That's like the drive-in standard, I feel like, right?
Exactly. And right. And distributors didn't bother reporting. So distributors only report box office numbers when they feel like it. And so, my distributor, IFC, was the first to report this what we made on screen, which is quite significant, to be honest with you, for an independent film. And then they went on to use the drive-in method for their subsequent releases, like Relic and The Wretched, which pulled in quite a lot of revenue, like even by normal independent theater standards. So it's pretty ingenious.
Yeah, I feel like horror films, it seems like drive-ins have I kind of always wonder why there aren't more like art house drive-ins, but like I do feel like the things that seem to work are classic blockbusters and horror films. And so it seems like, perfect fit actually.
Yeah.
That Swallow would be there. And I feel like on the big screen, I watched it on the small screen, but I feel like on the big screen it would be very creepy. So that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's the thing is, the big screen, let's talk a little bit about this whole HBO Max Warner deal, because everybody in the film industry is talking about it. And, while it might seem sort of a little inside baseball, it actually does affect like the world really, of anybody who watches movies. And I think it really affects the kind of content that's made and distributed. So I'm
Yeah.
just curious what your thoughts are. Basically, just to summarize, like, Warner Brothers decided to put all of their huge movies,
Yep.
big tentpole movies that they were supposed to release this year and next year on HBO Max.
Right.
And yeah,
They had started with like Wonder Woman, and then all of a sudden they were just like, we'll do the whole slate. We're just gonna put everything in this
right.
kind of like dual, like it'll come out online and come out big screen. I mean, it's funny. I looked at that and I wasn't kind of horrified by it. I mean, I guess there's a part of me that's always going to be a consumer, and so I was like, oh, that's great. I can watch Wonder Woman, sooner than later. Like, and now that HBO Max is on Roku, I felt even better. But at the same time, as someone who values going to the theater, and I think a lot of movies are made to be seen in the theater, despite how small they are. Again, my film, a small film, a film that's like, an intimate kind of thing, like, again, on the big screen, it really takes on a new life. And so I guess anything that threatens that, or threatens kind of like theater going in general, has a real downside to it. But I think, I don't know. It seems dubious, but it, like, for this year, it also feels like it makes sense. So I guess I'm really curious to see what it portends for the future beyond the pandemic. Like, if everyone's kind of vaccinated up and this remains as the model, which it seems like it might, then that would be, I guess, a little alarming. What's
Yeah,
your take?
pretty alarming. I mean, I think that it mean, even before the pandemic, streaming was sort of taking over, if you
Right.
will. And I think that, there's just such a glut of content, streaming content, that it's really hard for any one individual film to get attention.
Hmm.
And so, a lot of films just get thrown up on the smorgasbord buffet of streaming. And, it's hard for a film like yours and the types of films that I make to really get the attention that they deserve.
Right.
Just by being a thumbnail on the screen. And so, the theatrical model, the theatrical culture really, it's built to, treat these films as special
Hmm.
and like worth like building an event around, and worth like, going out to see with others
Yeah.
in a communal way. So
Absolutely.
I really do hope that this is temporary. But what I'm afraid of is that, in 6 months, when the theaters can open again, they're just not going to open, and they're half of them
Right.
are going to be gone. So
Right. Yeah,
that's
it seems like the kind of move that's what I mean, that can be very threatening. But I think also, I mean, this makes me think of a larger question, and I'm really curious for your take in particular. But like, I mean, in general, and I think you were just saying this, in general, this kind of move, and probably other moves in the future, and maybe what's already been, with streaming kind of growing, and episodic TV becoming something that's also, I would say, really just
yeah,
climbing the ladder of consumer viewership. Um, it's really hard to make a viable indie film right
really,
now.
it's really hard because there is so much to compete with.
Yeah.
You have to get butts in seats. You have to get people to leave their houses, and so, I think that it challenges films to be bolder and like, original. But then at the same time, it's kind of an oxymoron, because at the same time, it's harder to get to market those movies. I think distributors like films that fit in a box, because
Yeah.
they're easier for people to understand what they are quickly.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, I think, with a lot of streaming content and episodic content. It's super plot driven. There's not a lot of quiet moments. And like, when you're watching at home, there's a ton of other distractions. Uh,
Totally.
and so if you have a slow movie, you're going to go and check Twitter or whatever, like,
Right. Right.
versus being in a theater, in a dark theater, and being forced to like sit there and pay attention and just sort of meditate on this big screen experience. So I
Yeah.
do worry about the types of movies that are going to get financed and made.
Yeah,
With
I feel like it just changed too. I mean, it feels like obviously the pandemic is such a strange variable, but even before, I mean, 2 years ago when we made our movie, I think we thought it was one thing, and then as we get to now, again, you have to take into account the pandemic, but it seems like the landscape's radically changed in 2 years. And for a while, there was like a trend of how it seemed harder to make indie films of a certain size. Even now, like now, I'm just so curious what someone, like, you want to set out to make, a movie. Like, what do you want to set out to make an indie film? You're not aligned with a studio. You're somehow you're able to raise, 500,000 for, I mean, what, I don't know, what do you do exactly? Like, how do you kind of like set that up and
I mean, it's really hard. My experience on Swallow, I'll tell you, it was $1 million movie, which sounds like it is a lot of money, but not for a feature film.
right.
And it was like the hardest film that I had to find money for. Basically, it took a long time, like a year and a half. Which actually is not a long time. Like it usually takes longer now that I think about it. But
Right.
it was weird because we got all these offers. We got probably I think we got over $5 million worth of offers, but none of them fit together. Like none of them were for full financing. And
I see.
they were all pieces that we had to put together, but everybody wanted to have preferential treatment. Like we want to invest our money, but we want to be first out,
Mhm.
and so when you're dealing with private equity investors, you get a lot of this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So, however, it happened, it got made, and it's harder to find money that way. There are always new people entering the film industry that, it's a glamorous industry. People want to walk the red carpet. They want to learn about it. It's a fascinating industry. So there will be, I think there will always be people wanting to put money in, but I feel like the numbers going down and down and down. And so
Right.
then independent films in general are relying more on, studios and streamers to finance our movies. And so
Mhm.
you're seeing that now. I mean, streamers and studios are financing under $5 million movies a lot more than they used to.
Right.
And
Do you
but
feel like there are more like movies that are going to try to get made and have their deal set up earlier? I mean, I guess that's like, it's not, I mean, I would have loved to have that too. Everyone would love that. I feel like most movies, most indies, I mean, you tell me, like most indies, are they made knowing what their deal is? Or would you say most are made being like, well, we're just going to get our money. We can get our money this way and hopefully we'll recoup down the line. Do you think more indies are made that way?
if you're looking just at my, so I've produced about 24 features,
Yeah.
and only 4 of them had their deals ahead of time, their distribution deals ahead of time. So I've done 3 movies with Sony Pictures Worldwide Acquisitions that were negative pickups, meaning
Mhm.
like, the deal's already, the distribution deal is there. It's just I have to make the movie and deliver to them, and then they pay me. So
Right.
I Carry You With Me was actually one of these deals. Like we had
Yeah.
a deal with Sony Worldwide, and then Black Box was an Amazon financed feature through
Mhm.
Blumhouse. So, but these are more recent films. Like that's what I'm saying. Like I think before in my earlier career, like there was more equity finance movies, and there's something fun about that. I mean, it's not the best business model to like premiere a film at Sundance in the hopes that it will sell for a lot of money, but
Totally.
it's happened enough on my movies that I'm like, oh, it's that, and that's cool. And that's what equity investors like to do. They like to gamble. They
Right.
like
Right.
to put money. Yeah, and I've The Tale sold for a lot more than it was made for. This film that I made called Land Ho was sold for a lot more. Uh,
Mhm.
in a bidding war, and so there are still a handful of movies that can do that, but I
Right.
think right now the appetite for risk is so low, especially after this pandemic, that
Mhm.
I think people are more into sort of debt financing the films that already have distribution on the tail end.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's really it's wild to it's so interesting to hear your take on it. It's just like because mine was such a, we had basically 3 main, investors, and they were not from 2 of them were not from the film industry, and one was kind of actually, was involved, but it was just like, just pounding the pavement and finding people who
Yeah.
come in and I feel like, look, I want to make a great movie. I want people to love it. I want to love it. I want to be, but I also really want my investors to get paid back. Like people kept being like, what's your goal with this movie? And I would have all these aesthetic goals and philosophical goals, but I just kept thinking, I was like, I really just want these investors to be paid back more than anything, because that means I'll get to make another movie. I mean,
Exactly. They'll
that's
reinvest in the next one.
right.
Yeah.
So I guess I guess I don't, again, I've just made one movie, but I'm curious. I am really, yeah, I'm curious to see what, recouping looks like in the future, and what, how to kind of instill confidence in investors who are
Yeah. It's
looking.
hard though. I mean, I think any investor, if anybody on this call is thinking about investing in movies, you should call me, but also know that it's like super risky. I mean, it's like, I think, there've been multiple studies done saying that only something like 3% of dollars invested in independent film
Mhm.
is recouped.
Right.
So,
True.
but you're counting a lot of crap, that people make a lot of crap movies out there that don't get into festivals and whatnot. So, but yeah, it's very risky. It's extremely
Mhm.
risky. But
Totally.
I'm curious how. this, you brought up a good point. So you had 3 equity investors. How did you find them? Like, how, there was one question, somebody sent a question in advance, and they want to embark on making their first feature, and like, they have no idea how to do it. Since you just did it, like, how do you do that in this day and age?
Man, great. It's a great question. I do, I want to give, I don't want to, I could probably talk the whole rest of the call and like the whole narrative, but the short version is definitely that we had one. So one of the first financier, Evan Thayer, really, wonderful guy, someone who was in the theater world and wanted to get into the film world. He was on the board of directors of my wife's theater company. Just like, we had been talking, I'd known him for the longest time. And so he is someone who was like, I want to, be involved in a feature. I showed him my script and I said, I'm trying to make this film. And he was like, this is great. I love it. I love this film. I love your vision for the casting of it. Here's what I will do. He really is a unicorn in a way, I think, in that he was like, I don't want to give you any notes. I don't want to be involved with the kind of creative process. I just want to kind of support. And I want to know. And I was like, and I want to go seek out other investors. He's someone who comes from kind of Silicon Valley. And he was like, I know other people who have money, who have means. And he basically found us our kind of core investor, there's a part where Evan set us up with enough money to kind of like start casting and start the process. And he in turn got my producers excited. It's like, to answer the question as a first time, you basically have to keep finding reasons to keep everyone who's engaged with you motivated. You kind of, I'd say the 2 first things I did was have this investor kind of excited. But the other thing was I had to have a producer. You have to have, you haven't really begun until you have a producer who believes in you. And so I had a great producer, Brian Newman, who, I went to him really just asking about the script and how he thought I should go about making it. And he was very like, oh, I like the script. I could see this working. And then he was like excited that I had a kind of first investment. And then it's like you start kind of stacking things on top of each other. Is basically, again, the short version where you're just kind of creating new things to like, oh, let's get our casting. Okay, the casting director's involved. Well, now this investor is excited that we're reaching out to this actor. Now this actor, oh, you have money. So that agent is excited that I feel like we were always kind of, we had the money for the film, but did we have all the money? Not necessarily, but you're just kind of like trying to build confidence. That's just my opinion, build confidence in everyone who's working on the film so that they keep kind of making the net wider and make the film kind of, come to life. But the other funny thing is we shot in November of 2018. And I think in mid-October, I was like, wait, is this film going to happen? Because even with all the pieces in place, there was just still like a huge chunk of money that was missing. And it didn't come in until the very last second.
It was like committed, but like they had, right. It wasn't in the bank yet.
No, the very last investor, Lisa Kleiner-Chanoff, she didn't get in till I'd say about the last month. And she was someone who I think our producers knew, and she came in and she was wonderful. And but that was, I guess I'm just trying to illustrate how it just always hangs with an indie. I think a lot of times it can really hang by a thread.
Oh yeah, it always does. It's really, yeah. I've had so many films fall apart last minute, there was a film that I wanted to shoot in India 2 years ago,
mm-hmm.
last year, that fell apart last minute because one of the actors changed their mind and didn't want to go to India. Right. And they were like a very valuable actor. And so all the financing fell apart. On my very first feature as a lead producer, Children of Invention, which cost $150,000, by the way, it was really cheap.
Everyone should go see that movie, by the way. It's like, I just watched it a couple of days ago and I love that movie.
Thank you. Yeah, it's free. It's free on Tubi, I think, right now, or one of the ad-supported streaming. But yeah, that was like, we didn't get money in the bank until 3 days before. So we were just like prepping and location scouting with our credit cards, the director and I, until until we closed the investment deal.
Mm-hmm.
And then we lost our lead actor.
Jesus.
And had to recast.
Yeah.
So it's always something. You're always like putting out fires as a producer.
Right. Well, that was the analogy someone gave me when I was actually, this is the director, Leslie Headland, was one of the people who was nice enough to give me a little, one day of beautiful mentorship. And she was like, look, let me tell you the deal. When you're making a film, the vibe is that you're building a house, but the problem is there's a room in that house that is on fire. And so you just have to keep building the house, but the room is just always going to be on fire. Again, I think this probably maybe more for indies than for studio films, but do you have your own analogy? Does that make sense? Do you feel that
I
way?
don't have my own analogy. I like that one. But
I thought of it all the time because I did feel like making this feature. I mean, as like a first time director, I felt like one of the most important things I could do was just be unwaveringly confident and optimistic, even when I did not feel that way at all. It was just feel like you have to, everyone is this
fake
gonna
it till you
happen?
make it, right?
Right. I was very fake it until I make it, like really,
Yeah.
really right up into it. But you know, the fact that the house is on fire, the fact I feel like every day really maybe comes with a different like insurmountable problem. And then you find a way to kind of either sidestep it or surmount it in some like magical way. It's an endurance test. It's
Yeah.
fun, you know.
Yeah. Well, let's step back and talk about
Yeah.
Hunter, since this is a Hunter event, and how it might have impacted us or influenced
Yes.
us.
Absolutely. What were I feel like the place to start is what were your yearbook senior quotes? Do you remember?
I do. There are too many of them to quote.
I know I
I
had a lot of
posted
them
it on
too.
Instagram. I posted it on Instagram recently, so you
Oh,
can.
nice.
But it was about stuff about me being like, a type A audacious person, you know.
Right.
So,
Right.
which you kind of have to be. You have to be an aggressive person to be a producer. It's like really, it's hard.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, but Hunter was great. I loved it. First of all, not everybody loves Hunter, but I did love it. I love
Well,
that it was
absolutely.
arts focused, because I'm arts focused. I didn't do any theater. Like we were talking about this yesterday. I tried
Mhm.
out for some musical rep, and got called back, but never made the final. Like I almost got into Hair, the production. But my first exposure to like art house cinema was through Hunter. I mean, I think Senor Diaz, Jose
Mhm.
Diaz, my Spanish teacher, like he showed us Pedro Almodovar movies and
Oh,
like
nice.
movies like El Norte and The Official Story, which is great for my movie. I Carry You With Me it's also called Te Llevo Conmigo. It's a Spanish language film that we shot mainly in Mexico.
Yep.
It's about two undocumented immigrants who come to New York and end up, opening 3 very successful restaurants in Brooklyn, and just what they go through emotionally when they leave their families, and what they sacrifice to try to come here and achieve their dreams.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was a great. Mr. Diaz gave me great groundwork for that movie in particular. But also, I think we had social studies class where they showed us Eyes on the Prize, which I thought was amazing, and
Yep.
I think somebody made us watch Roots too, which was great.
Yeah. I feel like now that you mentioned it, I feel like I did see a lot of great film kind of like incidentally in different classes. Like I think social studies, I think we did the whole I Claudius series, which
Mhm.
was like very epic and surreal and amazing. I feel like Hunter, I mean, for me, Hunter, the thing I took a lot of I took a lot of arts classes at Hunter, a lot of writing and kind of literature and English classes. I
Mhm.
had a great English teacher, Miss Refkin. I think she might be here. I'm not sure.
Oh, is she?
No, but I mean, I did a senior project. There's just so many things that just come flooding back when I think about Hunter. I did a senior project where I wrote my first screenplay with her, like just one-on-one, and that was like very special. I guess I think of Hunter as having a kind of like academic freedom that I do feel like, once you've gone there, you can like never go back. I feel like I was then in like going to college, I wanted everything to be kind of I mean, I wouldn't say it's like formless. It's just that it's free. You're kind of searching. It makes you curious, very curious. And so,
Right, right,
I think
right.
Hunter was amazing in that way, in that regard.
Yeah, and growing up in New York too, frankly. I mean, that's why I became interested in filmmaking. I mean, my parents are working class immigrants from China and Hong Kong who
Right.
had zero connection to the film industry. And, just like commuting every day, that
Mhm.
long distance from Brooklyn to the Upper East Side, like, and just being in the city, we saw film sets everywhere.
Yeah.
And
True.
I just became fascinated by like how that whole circus is put together. And
Were you at Hunter when they were shooting The Fisher King?
yes, 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 for sure.
It was
You were
right
there,
there in the
you're a
school.
year below me, so you were there too, right?
Yes, I was. That's
Yeah,
right.
that was fascinating. All those wardrobe racks. I remember all of like Robin Williams like coats and wardrobe racks. It was really, yeah.
It
Really
is.
funny.
It was kind of amazing. I mean, that is definitely probably one of the first times I looked at a film set and was like, wow, there's a lot of people that work on this film.
Yeah, totally.
A
Truck
lot of like it's like
trailers.
right, this whole street is shut down, and the scene just seems to be two people. I mean, Robin Williams and Jeff Bridges like walking across the street, and yet it has like totally stopped
I
everything.
know.
You know,
If you see in the movie, like the segment that shows our school is like, I don't know, like 5 minutes. I mean, it's a
yeah,
very short,
I know, but
short period of time.
studio film, Terry Gilliam, I guess he's just like, we're going big, we're shutting it down, we're shutting down New York. But no, yeah, I just have kind of the fondest memories of Hunter. And I did theater, I did Brick Prison, and
Ah,
that was also very, even though I don't think I didn't write anything, but I like acted in like 3 plays. And like that, seeing kind of like peers writing, again, it's like there was just like a confidence, like a thing where it's like, oh wow, we actually, kids are like doing this on their own. Like that's kind of amazing that, you're given kind of like, you're trusted enough to put on like real theater. I'm sure there were obviously teachers involved, but it really felt like they were at arm's length in the best way. Like I just mean that they were like, you guys do it. I feel like at this point you're seniors, juniors, you'll figure it out. And there's something about, again, I know I keep going back with confidence, but I think ultimately you have to be confident to kind of like make it in the film industry in some level. So, I mean, that goes all the way back to Hunter, I think, giving us
right.
that.
On the flip side, yes, confidence is important, but also knowing your limitations is important too. Like I definitely, worked with people who didn't understand their limitations.
Right. Right.
Um,
Hopefully confidence with some humility would be good.
right,
And like,
exactly.
absolutely.
Um, what was your first professional experience in film or television?
Totally. My first one was actually also at Hunter. So wow, I mean, really, thank you to Hunter here. My senior year ICY project was working at Jonathan Demme's Clinica Aesthetico, his production company.
Oh,
And so I worked there, I think, for a few months. Maybe it was like, half a year, just like in the office, seeing kind of people come in and out, seeing Jonathan Demme coming in and out. This was I want to say right after Silence of the Lambs. And this was him. No, it might have been actually right after he had shot Philadelphia, but it hadn't come out yet, I think. And so I was basically watching this, seeing the kind of like inner workings of an office. And then the part of it that really sticks out the most was getting to go to Philadelphia and be a PA on the set of the Streets of Philadelphia music video, which is this Bruce Springsteen song that kind of ends the film, like a featured
great
part of the
song.
film. Yeah, great song. And like, and again, seeing a whole set and seeing how it worked and seeing how many people are involved. And, that to me was like this, just, it's like the ultimate collaborative form. And so
Yeah.
seeing that was very inspiring. And, I felt like I wanted to be a director, a filmmaker, certainly, probably when I was like, I'd say 13, 14. I knew really from the beginning, but seeing it and then being both intimidated by it, but also like, yes, I really want to be a part of this. Like, I want to be on this team, because it just seems like that's so cool that everyone's, again, working together, and the vision is like born from everyone working together. It seemed, I don't know, seeing that was very beautiful. How about you? What was
Yeah,
your?
totally. I felt the same way. I mean, I haven't had a lot of sort of like studio experiences. I can count them on one hand. So my first experience in a film set ever was basically I came after Hunter. I went to Harvard. I studied Chinese film and literature, and then I had debt to pay. So I ended up working at Time Magazine in marketing, and
Mhm.
I worked in like corporate media. I actually met Reed Hastings, who founded Netflix back in 1999.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, because I was working for this internet market research company that just we met with a bunch of startups and they told us their business plans. It was actually really interesting. And so I sort of felt like I had this business background, but I was always hankering for more creative stuff to do. Um,
Mhm.
so then 9/11 happened and I was like, everybody, it was another huge moment, like the one we're in now.
Yeah.
Makes you rethink what you're doing with your life. And so I ended up quitting my job. I was working in business development at sportsillustrated.com at the time.
Mhm.
Quit my job and I was like, you know what, I want to do film. I've always wanted to do it. I've never known how, and so I ended up looking at the mayor's office of, it used to be called the mayor's office of film, television, and broadcasting.
Mhm.
They put out this weekly job list of what's shooting in New York. And so basically looked at that list and saw somebody like they're like looking for a PA at a Jersey City motel, and their address was like a Harvard alumni address. I'm like, okay, well, they went to Harvard. I went to Harvard. Let me see if I could, get this free, like it was a volunteer PA job on an
Right.
NYU student film.
Totally.
So I basically like volunteered in Jersey City for 3 days, rubbing like coffee grounds on a bathroom wall at age 28. And I loved it. It was the
Yeah, sure.
best. Like the funny thing is, like, I'm still friends with about a dozen people from that shoot. And Mark Duplass was the star of that little short film.
Oh, really? Oh, wow,
I'm
that's
still
great.
friends with him now. So
That's so funny.
yeah, it was really funny. But I just loved how everybody just was. It was a singular focus.
Yeah.
It was a small crew. It was like 20 people, 25 people, but like we were all focused on doing the same thing. And we just kind of worked like a machine, and it was just amazing to see.
Yeah. No,
So
I
I
totally agree.
loved
It's a really it's such a beautiful thing, and it can really, I don't know, if you love movies, it can just get you hooked because you're just like, oh, look at everyone working on their little corner of the film, and then they stack all the pieces together, and then someone is gluing it together. I'm not sure how the analogy works, but it's really, it's a very special thing to kind of like be a part of.
It's very special, but it is very hard. I mean, if anybody's looking to get independent film, it's or film in general, it's incredibly difficult. I basically had to volunteer for
Totally.
a year before, I could actually earn enough money to like sustain myself,
Mhm.
and it's always it continues to be a challenge, and it's
Mhm.
sort of like if you're not in production, you're not making any money. And so it's a hustle. So it's definitely like if you're not entrepreneurial minded, you should not be an independent filmmaker. It's really hard.
How did you, can I ask, how did you make that show? So you're saying your first job was PA on a short, and then you
Job.
worked on a job. Right,
Yeah,
right. Internship.
right.
But you worked for did you do other shorts? Because your
Yeah,
first feature is Mutual Appreciation,
it
right? And
is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So basically,
yeah.
I went from my short that I PA'd for 3 days, and then NYU at the time didn't have a producing program. It does have a producing program now. There was just training directors basically.
Mhm.
So these directors needed producers, and so I produced 3 NYU thesis films.
Mhm.
Not having gone to the school at all, I basically got a free NYU film school education just by doing that. And so I learned physical production, and then from there, my first feature was Mutual Appreciation by this guy named Andrew Bajowski, who also went to Harvard. I didn't know him. I just like read about him in a magazine and contacted him. I was like,
That's so,
hey,
wow. I
I want
assumed
to
you
learn.
guys knew each other from Harvard. That's amazing.
No, no, we didn't know each other. Well, actually, no. How it happened was he was in Filmmaker magazine, 25 Faces, and then there was a woman named Irene Lutzig who also went to Harvard, and I knew her, and so I contacted her. I'm like, hey, I read about you in Filmmaker magazine. And she was like, oh, it sounds like you want to do narrative film though, not document. She makes documentaries.
Hmm.
See how little I knew. It's like I didn't even know the difference really, right?
I
And so
hear
she's
you.
like, it sounds like you want to make narrative features. You should go talk to Andrew Bajowski. So I did, and then basically made this film called Mutual Appreciation, which like sort of started the mumblecore movement,
Yeah.
American independent film. And
Just got a 4K restoration, right? I mean, it's
yeah, yeah, it's great. It's on Blu-ray now, but
yeah,
it was like we shot it on 16 millimeter black and white film. We had a
right.
crew of 5 people. It
Amazing.
was an amazing experience. I mean, the movie cost nothing. It cost like under $100,000. But yeah, from there, I ended up producing this film called Children of Invention, which I mentioned earlier, which cost $150,000, so a little bit more. And that was my first film as like a lead producer. So like
Mm.
that was the one where I was like, I closed the financing. I, participated in the development of the script and everything to the sale of the movie. And I actually distributed that movie myself too, because it's a movie about Asian American. It was basically about an Asian American family who was hit by the recession,
Mhm.
and it came out. We made the movie in 2008, right before the crash of 2008 in the fall. And then we premiered at Sundance in 2009, and all the independent distributors had gone belly up.
Mhm.
So nobody was around to buy a movie. It was like the most depressing Sundance. um, well, not for me because it was my first, but
Right, sure, sure.
and nobody wanted to buy this little movie with Asian American actors who nobody'd heard of. So we ended up deciding to self-distribute the movie, and
Mm,
like did quite well with that.
amazing. And
Yeah,
two of the best child actors I feel like I'd seen in a while. I mean, really, like, great
amazing.
actors. Like,
Yeah,
I thought that movie was wonderful.
yeah, they're amazing. But that obviously, getting into it really just opened all the doors. And we, my director and I made sure to go to every party and talk to everyone and just network like crazy. Because,
Yeah.
in the film industry, it's all about like who you know, right? So it's like the more people you know, the more you can kind of try to get your project off the ground.
Right.
So then from there, I just like made more and more and more features. And then I had another big break when I was hired to run Game Changer Films, which was an equity fund that financed women directed feature films. So we ended up investing in 10 features, including The Tale, starring Laura Dern, which is about child sexual abuse, The Invitation by Karan Kusama, Love Song by Young Kim. So yeah, and that was a great experience, wearing a financier hat as well as a producing hat. So, and then now I have my own company called The Population, which I formed with Molly Asher, who most recently produced Nomadland.
Yeah.
And Derek Wynn, who was working with me at Game Changer. And so, and we just announced our first look deal today.
Right. Congratulations. That's so
Yeah,
exciting.
it only took 13 years of producing to get one, but
Even so, it's really that's a special thing. I feel like for a producer to get. You were telling me that that's not something that happens
it's
often.
hard. So basically, a first look deal is when like a financier or a studio sort of like pays your overhead in exchange for like a first look at all your projects. So it's really hard for just a pure producer to get, unless you're like a former studio exec, but it's usually given to like very high profile actors, directors and whatnot. So, but I'm just glad that the company is Topic Studios, which produce Spotlight and The Climb. And they've just been really great. And like they recognize the value of a producer, which is
Right.
awesome.
That's so great. That's so fun. What do you, that actually makes me think of something. I'm just curious. This is kind of a broad question, but like as a producer, like how do you pick a project? Like what is it that, like, do you start with, are you kind of just like scoping like the filmmakers you already trust? Or are you constantly on the lookout for new material? Are
Yeah.
you just open to unsolicited? Like, what is it what is it?
We are, we love discovering new directors. Like it's funny because there's a lot of producers and filmmaker financiers who don't categorically won't work with first time directors because they're risky. Like they're not a proven entity. Like there's a lot of rookie mistakes.
Sure.
But we like it, and we kind of know how to work with them now. They do
Yeah.
kind of make the same mistakes. You guys make the same mistakes, but
Oh, we do. Oh, we make a lot of mistakes. That's a fact.
yeah, no, but it's but we kind of know how to guide the first timers now. And so we're open to first timers. We're always looking for new stuff. We do have some regular directors that we work with now, like Carla Miller Davis, who did Swallow. I hope to work with Heidi Ewing again. Molly's worked with Chloe Zhao 3 times, so we have like our regulars who send us stuff. Aaron Katz is another director that I work with a lot. But we are looking for both film, television, actually, and podcasts as well.
And I guess I'm curious, just sorry to even drill down, but like, what is it, like, what gets you excited about a project? Is there something like when you are reading a script that you're just like, that's it, that's what I like, when you see that, you want to make it, or is it just, could be anything?
It is very likely. It's very much chemistry, and it's very dependent on the zeitgeist, like what are, it's stuff that we are creatively drawn to personally, but it's also like we have to think about the marketplace. Like as a producer, you're translating between the artist and the marketplace, right? And so like it's not just like there are projects that we love that like are weird and experimental and like belong in a museum, but we can't do them because like they just won't fit in the marketplace. So so the marketplace is always a consideration, and like what's zeitgeisty, like what's urgent, like the movies that I made. Swallow addresses abortion and women's rights over their own, right to control their own bodies. And I Carry You With Me is about undocumented immigrants, so like we generally like to think about what are the timeliest issues, because publicity and like the hot topics of the day are important for independent films like ours, because like so much of how we rise above all this glut of content is like the culture is talking about you, and like if your film is about a topic that people are talking about, it just helps.
Totally.
So, yeah.
I know it is timely, but I also just want to talk a little bit more also about, I know I think we've got a Q&A coming really soon,
Yeah, right.
but I also want to say a little more, just I Carry You With Me, just, again, to me is like the perfect movie for right now. It's such a kind of like movie about human connection. It's about immigration. It's about, undocumented workers making their way. It's about the American dream, about all these like wonderful things like coming together. Can you just talk about like how's that going, I guess, right now? In terms of it's coming out next year in a few months, or what's
Yeah, as I mentioned, it's really weird. Like they put us in a theater in Sony Classics is our distributor. They put us for a week in a theater in Long Island just to qualify for like end of year awards and whatnot. And then originally, like basically they're going to release us in the spring sometime, when the theaters are open, because Sony Classics is a very traditional theatrical distributor. Like there were a lot of companies that sold their movies to streamers. During the pandemic, because that's the only way you can really see a movie, because most of the theaters in the country were closed. But Sony really believes in theatrical, and this is a theatrical movie. It's a beautiful movie. It's like a lyrically shot movie, and we want people to see it on the big screen. But it's been heartbreaking because, like, we made this movie a long time ago, and we premiered it almost a year ago at Sundance, and we're just dying for people to see it.
Totally. It's had a great festival run. I mean, it's been amazing. It's been all over. I saw New York Film Festival, I think, was where I saw it.
It played at the Queens Drive-In
That's right.
during New York Film Festival.
Amazing. Amazing.
All right, you should take questions.
Yeah, let's do it. Who's got questions?
Okay.
Oh, there's some. Yeah.
So everyone, if you'd like, you can come on with your video so we can see you all. And we have our first questioners. Hi, Louise. Nice to see you.
Hi. Hey, Miss Refka.
I wanted to highlight you when he was talking about you, but it was just so hard to bring you on board.
So exciting.
I see a question here from Leslie. She says, what's a girl to do when development money is in short supply and grants overwhelmed by demand? Development money is really hard to get. I mean, I basically have only gotten it, I think, twice in my entire career. It's really hard. But I think you just have to, like with any kind of money, whether it's development or production financing, like it's about identifying like the players who are interested in your subject matter. For independent film, like it's passion driven, right? It's affinity driven. So it's about identifying the people who are going to be your champions, who have the capital.
Mm-hmm. Is it also, do you think it's also, what do you think about applying to like labs and whatnot? Do you feel like that's a way to kind of a way in for someone looking for?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like Sundance Labs, and Sundance does give grants outside of their, normal, lab cycle. Right. San Francisco Film Society gives
Film Independent, right? Doesn't Film Independent have a lab? Film
Independent has labs. I don't know if they give grants, but they do. Right. They give some grants, but they have a lab. And who else? Have you done labs? Oh, you did IFP, right?
I did IFP, which was like kind of like a pitching lab, but it was great. I mean, it just honestly just getting a chance to kind of like refine the pitch. This is like my very first feature, which by the way was about Killer, a game I played at Hunter. But that was like refining that pitch, and I got a manager because of that. So I just think doing labs, if you're like looking for money, you do always have to be making your pitch kind of better and better, and getting materials and finding out what you need to kind of show off your, at least in my experience, like making the lookbook, making all these things, like just finding making all the things that then will help you get that money when you have that opportunity. So IFP was really the only lab that I actually like did in person. Everything else has been, but applying for them, I just think is like such a kind of great way to figure out what it is your film's about, frankly.
Yeah, it is. And not just labs, but they have these, like Fast Track is another one where like you kind of speed date with financiers and producers. It's like, right. It's all about like going back to the whole network and connections and sort of connections beget connections, just like your story about your equity financier, right? Yeah. I mean, you got one guy and he brought on another guy. So it always sort of happens that way. And it takes time. It takes years, right, to build that network. But eventually you'll have it and you can tap it and, or bring on a producer who has it, and they can tap their network for you.
Absolutely.
Trevor had a question. I'm sorry, he's been very patient. Go ahead.
Hi, Trevor.
Hi, Mynette. I met you at Sundance. I don't know if
I remember. It's Mynette, by the way.
Mynette. Oh, sorry. But I loved your work. Children of Invention, like I'm a filmmaker too. I'm a writer, director, and actor. And I want to make my first feature next year.
Mhm.
and it's about it's about kind of my personal story about coming to America and being an immigrant, but 20 years later, and because my 20-year reunion is coming up, and so all these things like who did I want to be as a high school student and who I am now, and coming to terms with the disconnect there.
Mhm.
And I was wondering, how do you go about finding a producer who believes in your work? How do we get in touch with you? Because you say you're interested in first-time filmmakers, or feature directors, things like that. So how do we get in touch with you? And how do we go about finding producers that believe in our work?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because like we don't, I mean, officially many producers don't accept unsolicited submissions because of legal issues. So like, usually a manager or an agent or a lawyer will send stuff to us. But I think bringing up what Kaz brought up, which is the labs, like we scout labs, like my company, The Population. So we look at the Sundance lab, all those labs that I just mentioned, Sundance, Film Independent, Rotterdam lab, Berlin Talent Campus. Like we look at all the blacklist. I mean, that's not a lab, but it's a thing. So any kind of sort of like official industry thing, like we will scour those things. So I think that, for first-time filmmakers, I always suggest going through those programs and submitting to those programs first.
And I think if I can just chime in as a filmmaker, I think also, if you have shorts, like getting shorts into festivals and then going to festivals, you will end up meeting people at those festivals, especially if it's like a Sundance or a Tribeca. If you're lucky enough to get into one of those, I mean, first of all, making a short is just a good, obviously great practice for making a feature, but it's like you want to create kind of like things that can either get you some kind of like accolade or bona fide, where it's like, hey, I made this short, it was in short of the week. And so when you're talking to a producer, you want to give them a reason to be, you can't just bank only on your script. You have to have like, oh, and I've done this and I've done that. And that's just like a reason we should be talking and, going up and talking.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like, I said, even though I said like, we do like to work with first-time feature directors, like, I don't think I've ever worked with a director who's not at least directed a short, so that's, yeah.
If we do, because I've made 4 shorts now. One of them has won, I think, 4 awards. And I currently have another short currently on the festival circuit right now. I worked with an Oscar-winning editor, and Company 3 colored it and everything like that. It's just like I'm trying to transition into this world, and I've been doing things, and I just moved out to LA, because that's where you're supposed to be. And I'm just trying to find that sort of little doorway, because it seems like currently with the climate right now with the pandemic, like doors are shutting left and right. There's a lack of
financing. There's nothing getting made right now. I mean, nobody's financing. I've made nothing since February. So like, and it's incredibly hard for me to find financing. I have like 2 pretty dark scripts that I want to make next year. And it's like impossible to, they're like, oh, nobody wants to watch a dark movie. We're in dark times, so it's challenging for everyone. But I really would suggest that you start with those labs. There's a lot of them. I mean, there's like, I don't know, at least 3 dozen. And we look at those, we scout those.
Cool, thank you.
Jennifer, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for talking about your experience. It's been really helpful. I just wanted to know, do you feel like the audience appetite for English-speaking Asian actor-led films has increased at all in the last year or two, especially post Crazy Rich Asians? I know a lot of people are talking about it, but from a producer and a director perspective, do you guys feel like anything has changed?
Well, I mean, there's The Farewell did really well, right? I mean, and actually that movie was bilingual. I think it was like half and half Chinese and English. Minari, I think, would have done well. Minari is also like half Korean, half English. And that's a film that premiered with ours at Sundance and also got caught up in the pandemic and would have been released in the theaters this year.
On Netflix, maybe in like a couple months, I think.
No. Did they just announce that? No, I don't.
I just can't remember what's happening with it. I
no,
thought
it's releasing
I'm like dying to see it. I can't see, and I hear Minari is amazing.
It did a 1-week run at a virtual run at Film Society at Lincoln Center last week. And then it's going to be released by A24 in theaters in February, supposedly, if theaters are open. So, but it's still challenging. Like, I have well, one of my they're dark. See, so I have two movies. One of them is a Spanish language movie set in Mexico, and another one is a Chinese American movie based on a true story that has Lucy Liu attached to it. But it's about this mother, a true story about this mother in the San Gabriel Valley who ends up like shooting her teenage son because he exhibits interest in mass shootings. So, you know, these are darker stories that, you know, half of that is Chinese and half of that is English. So, and people are interested because of Lucy and the subject matter. It's a really great script, but it's on the darker side. So it's hard to just say Asian. It's like, what kind of Asian story? If it's like a really super happy Asian story, you'd probably have more luck than I do, you know?
Right. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. Yeah, that's that assessment. I mean, I feel like I'm seeing more films, but that, you know, but I don't know if it's changing fast enough. I feel like a lot of things right now, there's a lot of kind of great conversations that are going on and films that, you know, a lot of potential films, but I feel like it's just kind of like, let's speed things up. That's what I
know. But, you know, it's funny because like I was actually just complaining on Twitter the other day about like the fact that foreign films do still get ignored. Like, you know, I Carry You With Me is an American-Mexican co-production. It takes place in Mexico and New York City, but it is 95% in Spanish. And it's very hard to get the attention of the American press. If you're a foreign language film, Parasite was an exception. It didn't really help the rest of us, unfortunately. And, you know, I think
it might down the line. It's, I mean, that movie is
maybe, I don't know. I mean, Bong Joon-ho is his own industry, you know, so it's hard to compare. But
we'll just make another Parasite, no big deal, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we'll just make another Parasite. But it's been growing increasingly hostile to foreign films, unfortunately. Any other questions? Were there more in the chat? Eniko?
Not to me. Even that question that you read came to you directly, I think, because it didn't come to me. So
Ms. Refkin has a question.
I have a question. Hi, both of you. Nice to see you. And I admit I have a vested interest here. I have a son who's in college now studying film.
Oh, cool.
And I'm wondering, do you see the MFA track as, you know, a successful route towards independent filmmaking or not?
The MFA, like you mean getting a master's, getting like a film
master's in directing?
Probably directing or writing.
Right. I'm not sure. I mean, I work with a lot of people who've gotten MFAs in directing and from NYU or UCLA. So it depends on your son. Like if he thrives in that kind of environment and like, you know, it's certainly like, I think hones your skills as a director, you know, and then you have shorts that you can show. It's expensive though. So, you know, so it's sort of like you know, I think it really depends. It doesn't hurt, you know?
I didn't go to grad school, but I do think I was always kind of like interested in, you know, other filmmakers I knew who did go to, I knew a lot of people who went to like Columbia, for instance, for their masters in film. And the one thing that I would say that seemed actually very beneficial is the fact that you're starting out with a network. Yes. Whereas I feel like with I went to Vassar, I got my bachelor's there, and everyone, you know, I went to New York with a lot of people, but no one was kind of connected. Like we were all kind of on the exact same plane. None of us had made kind of like real films in any way. So I feel like going to grad school, you end up kind of, you often will meet people who, I mean, you're working with real filmmakers, usually in a grad school setting. So I do think if you can afford it, I think it's like it can be a really nice way to jump into the film industry, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
It can also, some of my, some of the folks that I work with, like for some of them, it was a very competitive environment. So it wasn't so great. Most of them liked it, but you know, it really depends on the individual.
Anything that gives you reps though, like that's one thing that's good, I think good about, you know, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but anytime you're writing a screenplay, you know, or like directing a film, you're just getting better and doing it in kind of, you know, again, a grad school circumstance, you're going to be critiqued. It's like, you really have to do it in a real way. So I don't know why I'm singing the praises of, I just think it's just a great place to, you know, where you can actually like make those first films and get those kind of first reps, you know.
Yeah. Oh, but as a producer, if he wants to be a producer, I don't think film school is that useful. Like, I think producing is best learned by doing.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
totally helpful. Thank you.
sure. I think that's it for questions, right, Aniko?
I think so. I mean, Leslie raised her hand, but I don't know if she
Oh.
wanted, it was just a mistake or not, and she's not. Leslie, did you want to ask something? Okay, she's not even.
Okay.
Okay. All right, then I think if no one has, okay, she has, if no one has any other questions, then I'm going to thank you, Mynette and Casimir.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I'm on my tablet and it's like 10 o'clock at night. So I'm not
okay.
even sure that the audio is that fabulous. But I'm a documentary producer and director who started out as Mynette did in New York City working in production. And I have to say, there's no better way to get into the business and to know the business, really know the business from the ground up than working as she did, which you can do. You can get involved in, I don't know where Miss Refkin's son is, but if you do go to New York or LA, I mean, there are always these, you know, the equivalent of the mayor's, you know, office for broadcasting, which is
Right.
how I got my first start. I really think it saved the money because we're in the middle of a pandemic, but there's a lot of stuff that's got to get made. That's all. I'm just saying.
I would say it depends on the person, you know, and I think
Of course, but
especially for a writer director, if, you know, I think they benefit from sort of being in a sort of cocoon environment, let's say, you know, and developing their work and growing as an artist. So it depends on the person. So yeah.
It does. But I am not anti grad school. I just kind of think right now, given the times that we're in, you know, and the amount of, you know, just where realistically we're all at, probably I would try my luck, I think, if it's equally as hard to go get a job. Sorry, it's like almost 11, it's 10 o'clock at night here in London, which is where I've lived since 2002. So
No worries.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. I do have to dash, but this is great.
Thank you so much, Mynette and Casimir, for the wonderful conversation, and thank you everyone for your questions and coming. And we'll hope to see you at future events. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Take care,
you.
everybody.
thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.